Caleb never truly knew what love was. He grew up without reference, without gentle touches or words that warmed the heart. To him, love was always an abstract concept, something he saw in movies but never actually felt. His parents had a cold and distant marriage, marked by heavy silences and stifled arguments. The affection between them seemed like an obligation, not something that stemmed from a genuine desire to be together. His father, a rigid and controlling man, saw emotions as a weakness. His mother, always absent, seemed to exist within a dome of indifference, oblivious to her son's emotional needs. Growing up in this environment, Caleb learned to toughen up. He created a thick shell around his own heart, convincing himself that feeling too much was dangerous, and that love, after all, was just a convenient construct, something that served to fill gaps. Then he met Scarlett. She seemed to be the answer to everything. She was beautiful, captivating, and had a glow that dazzled anyone around her, and Caleb thought he had finally found what he was missing. He projected all his expectations onto her, all his unresolved yearnings. He believed that by her side he could understand what love was, that he would finally know what it meant to be chosen, to be truly cherished. They were engaged. He imagined that finally everything had fallen into place and that he could be capable of building something real. Scarlett seemed to be the key to his happiness, the end of a quest he no longer knew how to pursue. But deep down, it wasn't love. It was desire. It was need. It was a blind search for something he never had. And all of this crumbled the day he saw the messages from Scarlett to another man. She didn't try to deny it. She simply shrugged and admitted it with a cruel nonchalance, as if it carried no weight whatsoever. As if he didn't matter. The betrayal was a deep blow, but not just because he had been betrayed. What really destroyed him was realizing that everything he believed to be love was nothing more than an illusion. After the devastating relationship with Scarlett, Caleb found himself lost, in need of affection, but unable to cope with his own feelings. He felt disconnected from himself, not knowing how to fill the void consuming him. It was at this moment of fragility that he grew closer to Grace. Friends for years, she had always been by his side, offering unconditional support. With her welcoming nature, she listened to him patiently, comforted him in difficult times, and reached out when everything seemed to fall apart. For Caleb, that was enough. He wasn't looking for love, just something to ease the loneliness. And Grace was there, ready to offer exactly that. For years she was his confidant, someone he could trust without reservation. But he never saw her beyond friendship. To him, Grace was simply Grace, loyal, understanding, but never the woman he would imagine sharing his life with. Grace, on the other hand, always loved him in silence. From the day she met him, she carried a fondness that went beyond friendship, but feared revealing her feelings and losing the connection they had. Thus, she kept her love a secret, nurturing the hope that one day Caleb would finally see her in a different light. One day, in a moment of need, when they were together, Caleb hugged her more tightly than usual. Grace seemed to be his anchor amidst the chaos, and without thinking, he surrendered to that moment. Then, on an impulse, their lips met. The kiss wasn't driven by passion, but by a desperate need to feel less empty. Shortly after, he asked her to date him. For Caleb, it was just an escape, a way to move on without facing the pain that still consumed him. He told himself there were some feelings involved, but deep down, he knew it was convenience. Grace, on the other hand, believed in the potential of that relationship. She was willing to wait, convinced that in time he would learn to love her. She gave herself to what Caleb offered her, even knowing it wasn't exactly what she wanted. For her, it was a chance to live the romance she always dreamed of, albeit in an imperfect way. But despite the apparent stability, the relationship lacked the emotion Grace expected. Caleb was still dealing with Scarlett's betrayal and deep down was with Grace because it was the easiest option. They knew each other well, they were friends, and he didn't believe he would find someone better. He settled, not realizing that for Grace, it was just a shadow of the love she always desired, a love that, in the end, was never reciprocal. The breaking point came when Caleb received a call from Scarlett. He was shocked to see it was her calling. She knew he had been shaken by everything that happened but still called. Not out of remorse, but because she liked to maintain control over him, as always. Upon finding out he was with Grace, she didn't hesitate and tried to destabilize Caleb with her cruel and irreverent manner, asking if his relationship with Grace was serious, as if the answer didn't matter. There was a trace of jealousy in her voice, but the sarcastic tone tried to disguise it. Caleb, filled with anger and wounded pride, didn't think twice before answering. "Yes, it's very serious. We are engaged." She was silent on the other end of the line, appearing surprised by the information. But those words, spoken without much meaning, were enough for Caleb to make a decision. Later, he looked at Grace and, not thinking about the true reasons driving him, proposed to her. As a form of revenge on Scarlett, a way to prove that he too could move on, that he didn't need her to be happy. Marrying Grace would be a way to regain lost self-esteem, to show everyone, including Scarlett, that he was still in control of his life. Grace, when surprised by the proposal, did not hesitate. Since she was little, she had learned that love had to be won. She grew up in a home where affection came with conditions, and this made her believe that if she worked hard enough, she would be loved. So when Caleb chose her, even sensing the lack of feeling on his part, she accepted. For her, it was familiar to love without being loved back, and deep down, she believed that in time, he would learn to love her. Their marriage began, and they seemed more like good friends. Caleb couldn't emotionally commit himself. He was trapped in the past, still obsessed with Scarlett and the need to show he had not been defeated, but this battle was internal. He treated Grace with respect, but never with the love she desired. He was physically present but emotionally distant. She, in turn, continued to give herself silently, hoping he would finally see her as more than just a wife, but as the woman who could offer him real love. As months went by, Grace began to realize that despite all her efforts, Caleb did not love her. This hurt her deeply, even though she knew the truth from the beginning. But she stayed by his side, believing that maybe one day he would look at her differently. She dedicated herself to the marriage, treated him with care and affection, hoping that he at some point would open to her love. She knew that time was necessary for him to heal his wounds, and she was willing to wait because he had always been her only hope. But time unexpectedly began to change things. Caleb started to realize that Grace, although not the romantic love of his life, was the only person who truly loved him unconditionally. She was by his side without expecting anything in return, without games, without selfish interests. She cared for him without hesitation, offering her support without demands. She was always there, in the small day-to-day things, listening to him, supporting him, without requiring him to be someone he was not. And with that, Caleb began to question himself. Could the love he had always sought have been right in front of him all along? Every night, when Caleb laid his head on Grace's lap, he felt something he had never experienced before: peace. She would run her fingers through his hair, a gesture so simple, yet carrying infinite tenderness. He closed his eyes, allowing himself to relax, allowing himself to be cared for, something he had long believed he did not need. Initially, he couldn't understand how someone could love like that, without asking for anything in return. But every day, Grace surprised him, with small gestures, with kind words, in the way she seemed to see beyond the hardened shell he had created around himself. When he came home tired, she already knew what to say to calm him. When turbulent thoughts haunted him, she simply held his hand without needing explanations. Caleb's transformation wasn't immediate. At first it was just a subtle feeling, a silent admiration. But over time, he realized that the love he'd always searched for might have been right there, before him, waiting just for him to open his eyes and see. Guilt came first. The realization that for so long he treated Grace as a refuge, not noticing that she was much more than that. But along with guilt came gratitude, because she never gave up on him, even when he didn't deserve it. And in that moment, Caleb made a choice. He chose to love. He learned that love wasn't a fleeting feeling or an overwhelming emotion, but a daily decision. He chose to be present, to choose her every morning, to reciprocate everything she had always offered freely. And by making that choice, he realized that Grace had also changed. For the first time, she not only gave love but also allowed herself to receive it. She learned that true love doesn't need to be begged for, nor earned. It comes from the other side too. Together, they healed their wounds. Together, they discovered that love wasn't about filling voids, but about overflowing. What began as convenience and neediness slowly transformed into something deep and true. Caleb, finally free from the shadows of the past, gave his heart to Grace in a way he never thought possible. And she, realizing this, knew she no longer needed to seek validation or settle for scraps. Because now, with him, she was loved, whole, completely, as she always deserved to be. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.